They called it a celebration, but for me it felt more like a public erasure. My name is Bryn Ashford, and 7 years ago, I was dismissed from Westgate Military Institute under a cloud of silence and shame no one dared to question. My family said I lacked discipline, couldn't follow orders, and maybe they were right if saving 3 cadets from a live fire zone against protocol makes you unfit to lead. They never told that part of the story. They just told everyone I quit. Tonight, I returned home for the first time in years. Not for a birthday or a funeral, but for a promotion dinner. My younger sister Jenna had just made first lieutenant, top of her unit. My father, retired Colonel Ronald Ashford, was practically glowing with pride. The entire Ashford clan had gathered at the Fort Granger Officers' Hall, a place lined with war plaques, whiskey, and worn honor. I stood in the corner wearing gray slacks and a black windbreaker. No medals, no insignia, no place card with my name. The projector cycled through Jenna's training photos. Jenna on the range, Jenna saluting, Jenna grinning under a flag. My father clinked a fork against a glass and raised it. To the future of this family. Nobody looked at me, not even Jenna. I wasn't supposed to come. I hadn't RSVP'd. But when a notice from my unit flashed across the embedded screen inside my coat, observer directive. Fort Granger passive only. I understood. They hadn't invited me, but I had been assigned. Jenna's voice echoed across the hall. She spoke about honor duty sacrifice. Everyone clapped. I poured myself a glass of water and stepped outside into the evening air. The sky was tinted blue-gray, heavy with early spring humidity. I sat alone on a bench behind the hall, listening to the hum of conversation through brick walls, the occasional laugh that felt like it had someone's name on it, mine. It was easier for them to believe I failed, that I broke under pressure, that I cracked. Because if they believed the alternative, they'd have to admit something far worse, that they left me behind. I never told them where I went. I didn't send updates, didn't return calls. It wasn't spite. It was policy. After Westgate, I was recruited into a non-attributed intelligence directive, Gray Ops Off-Books Zero Footprint. They called it Orion. My job was to watch, to remember, to record, not to be seen. Inside, the projector clicked again. A group photo, Jenna in front. Me long since cropped out. I watched from the shadows, not because I was hiding, but because it was the only place they'd ever let me exist. My father stepped outside for air. He didn't see me. He lit a cigar, exhaled, and muttered to himself, proud of that girl. Did it the right way, not like the other one. The other one. I didn't flinch. I just let the words settle. And then I heard a soft buzz from inside my coat. A pulse in my side. Fort Granger. Active cadet unit. Civilian observer tag logged. Request confirmed. I looked down at the tiny screen embedded in the lining. It blinked once, then went dark. It had begun. Not the mission, not revenge, just recognition. I stood quietly, brushing imaginary dust from my lap. This wasn't about being seen. It was about finally seeing who they really were. And this time, I wouldn't look away. The last time I stood in front of a military tribunal, I was 29. They handed me a blank withdrawal form and told me it was for the best. The incident report listed non-compliance during a live exercise. What it didn't list was that I'd pulled 3 cadets out of a miscalculated live fire zone, a zone we were never supposed to enter. Our commanding officer had made an error, and I had seconds to decide whether to follow his call or save lives. I chose the latter. What followed wasn't a commendation. It was silence. Then paperwork. Then exile. My father, who still taught strategy courses at Westgate at the time, read the after-action report and didn't say a word until we got home. He poured himself a scotch, looked me straight in the face, and said, "You embarrassed command, and you embarrassed me." Then he added cold and final, "Maybe you're not built for leadership." That was the last full sentence he spoke to me. I didn't argue. I didn't appeal. I signed the withdrawal form with steady hands, packed my regulation duffel, and left without ceremony. No one asked if I was okay. No one offered me a ride. I folded my uniforms, cleaned my boots, and walked out of that dorm like I was erasing my own footprints. 2 weeks later, I received an unmarked envelope at my temporary address in Arlington. Inside was a single line, "Bring your file." Nothing else. The building I went to looked like an insurance firm, beige walls, broken vending machines, zero identity. But behind a door marked Office 7C, I met the woman who changed everything. She didn't introduce herself, just slid a contract across the table. You'll be off record. No public affiliation, no acknowledgments. You'll have clearance, not credit. Still want in, I signed before she finished the sentence. They called it Orion Directive, a civilian-adjacent intelligence unit buried between federal oversight and military structure. We handled pattern threats, gray zone leaks, internal tampering, anything too quiet or too delicate for public court. In Orion, I wasn't punished for thinking too fast. I was rewarded for it. Over the years, I learned how to disappear in plain sight. I changed names, addresses, hair colors. No social media, no public record. Even my old student loans disappeared. To the world, Bryn Ashford became a rumor. But Orion knew me, and when they assigned me to quietly observe Fort Granger, they didn't do it by accident. They knew my sister was there. They knew what this meant. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the report that ruined my life, I had never stopped looking for it. And now, at Fort Granger, the trail was about to surface again. Jenna didn't know what she was holding when I gave her that binder. I'd shown up unannounced at her officer training graduation 2 years ago and handed it to her like it was nothing. A standard field leadership manual, the kind Orion cloaked their embedded tools in. I told her it might help sharpen her coaching methods. She nodded politely, barely flipped it open. But I knew she'd keep it. Jenna always held on to anything that might impress our father. The binder had a brushed steel insert stitched into the back pocket, disguised as a structural weight plate. To most, it would feel like nothing, but embedded inside was a cold-link data wafer dormant unless connected to a foreign device. It wasn't meant to be opened. It was meant to detect. And now, 2 years later, it had finally blinked. At exactly 0416, a ping hit my encrypted terminal. Unauthorized device connection. Node location Fort Granger. Asset Ashford 22. The alert was clean, silent, unmistakable. Jenna had connected her tablet to the binder. She'd found something. She wouldn't have understood what it was. The wafer didn't contain operational files. It contained a tripwire. And what triggered it wasn't curiosity. It was legacy. More specifically, our father's old clearance signature. A dormant credential that should have been deactivated years ago. The same signature that had rewritten my training report. I stared at the metadata streaming across my screen. Ronald Ashford. Clearance code 229 Lima. Timestamp 7 years ago. And just beneath it, the modification entry, revised cause of tactical breakdown. Cadet insubordination. Commanding officer exonerated. The original report had been sealed, archived, labeled a deviation file with no action taken. Now the truth was surfacing by Jenna's own hand. I didn't know if she meant to open that door, but she had. And the system had registered it as an internal breach. Not a public scandal, not yet. But within Orion, a breach tied to a legacy clearance triggers one protocol-only internal compromise. The kind that doesn't go away quietly. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, watching my secure terminal blink like a heartbeat I hadn't felt in years. A part of me wanted to shut it down. Let the signal die. Let the lie live. But another part, the part they tried to silence, whispered, "This is the moment. Not for vengeance, not for redemption, for truth." Fort Granger's morning drills had a rhythm to them, boots on gravel commands cutting through dry air cadence, echoing off concrete walls. I arrived just after sunrise, wearing standard-issue black tactical slacks and a civilian windbreaker. My observer badge was clipped low face down, just like Orion instructed. No one knew I was there. That was the point. I slipped into the second row of the bleachers between 2 bored colonels' wives sipping thermoses and a young officer taking notes like it mattered. Below, Jenna stood at the front of her unit. Voice sharp, chin high. Her posture was textbook perfect, everything our father trained her to be. She didn't see me, or maybe she did and chose not to react. Either way, I stayed still. The drill was routine movement to contact, loud and overly choreographed. It wasn't worth flagging, not from an intel standpoint. But as I scribbled a note, the energy shifted. Sergeant Halbrook, an old-school drill master, built like a freight train, walked the perimeter. His eyes scanned left, then right, then locked dead center on me. He stopped. 1 beat, 2. Then turned sharply and headed straight for the bleachers. Whispers started immediately. Cadets turned their heads. Even instructors went silent mid-command. The air crackled with confusion. He reached me and stood 5 feet away, then snapped to attention. General Ashford, ma'am. I wasn't informed you'd be observing today. The entire field froze. I looked up, slowly met his eyes, and answered without flinching. At ease, Sergeant. I'm off duty. Carry on and keep it quiet. Yes, ma'am. No hesitation, no confusion, just protocol. He pivoted, returned to the field as if nothing had happened. Jenna's rifle hit the concrete. Everyone heard it. She didn't look at me, but every other pair of eyes did. Rank doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just stands up and gets saluted. 10 minutes later, I rose and walked the long way around the field, past the obstacle course, past the flagpole. I didn't need to look back. The message had already landed. Back at my quarters, the alert still blinked, waiting for me to trace it. I decrypted the metadata from Jenna's device and watched the code unfurl like a scar across the screen. The wafer she triggered hadn't just recorded access. It had traced the signal to a dormant clearance path, one tied to my father's ID 229 Lima. It wasn't a guess. It was fact. 7 years ago, someone using that credential had entered a secure channel and altered a field report. Just 3 lines of text surgically placed. But those 3 lines rewrote everything. They shifted blame from a failed command op to a non-compliant cadet. That cadet was me. The original version, my version, was buried in Orion's anomaly archive, mislabeled as a training irregularity. No further action, no appeal, no audit, just silence. Until now. The signature matched. The timestamp aligned. The location pinged from the old Westgate server hub. The only person who had that level of access, back then, Colonel Ronald Ashford, my father. I stared at the screen unmoving, not angry, not broken, just still. Like the air in a locked room after someone leaves and doesn't come back. Then I opened a blank slate and typed one word at the top Echorift. It wasn't for revenge, not even to get my record cleared. It was to understand, not why he did it. I already knew. Image, order. The chain of command was everything to him. No, I needed to know how long he let the lie live. How many times he let people point to me as the example of what not to become. How many times he told Jenna that I cracked under pressure while knowing he'd written the failure himself. I closed the terminal. Then I picked up my phone and whispered into the secure channel. She knows. Not Jenna. Me. She waited for me near the outer fence line just past the maintenance sheds where no one patrolled. Her arms were crossed, jaw-tight boots planted like she'd grown roots. Jenna always had that posture, composed, proud, immovable. But this time, it was holding something back. You gave me that binder, she said quietly, eyes locked on mine. You knew I'd open it. I hoped you would. You planted something. I left a door, I answered. You stepped through it. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but restraint. What was on the other side, I didn't answer. I simply pulled out my slate keyed in the access log and tilted it toward her. Her eyes scanned the screen, then stopped. Dad's clearance code, she whispered. That can't be right. It's real. She stepped back, like the air had pushed her. He said you cracked, that you couldn't handle the pressure. He needed me to look weak, I said, so his version made sense. Jenna's face shifted not into confusion or anger, but recognition. Like part of her was clicking into place. Like something she'd heard her entire life had just gone sour in her mouth. You let everyone believe you failed. They were going to believe it anyway. Her hands went to her hips. You let me believe it. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. For the first time, Jenna didn't fill the silence. She let it hang between us, heavy, honest, unflinching. I wanted to be like him, she said finally. I know. She shook her head, steadying her breath. Not anymore. That was the moment the weight shifted. Not from me, but from her. I saw it in her shoulders. She wasn't choosing sides. She was choosing truth. She looked back at the slate in my hand. What do we do next? I handed it to her. We stopped pretending, I said. She took the device like it burned, and she didn't let go. We didn't file through the usual channels. Jenna refused. I'm not passing this through base review, she said. If he used legacy clearance, it goes above him. So we went silent. Orion silent. The intake node we submitted to bypassed chain of command entirely. No visible routing, no paper trail. Just one sealed data packet co-signed by me and Jenna, uploaded through a buried relay node only 3 people in the country could trace. 12 hours later, the response came. Closed session. Oversight panel. 2 days. Both parties required. It wasn't a hearing. It was an audit. And everyone in that room would already know the truth before we walked in. The building was cold metallic, the kind of place designed to strip emotion from memory. No windows, no brass. Just rankless chairs and a table polished to silence. Colonel Ronald Ashford arrived on time, starched and composed. He nodded once at Jenna. Didn't look at me, the chairperson began. Colonel, you're here to respond to a digital credential trace showing you altered a field training report 7 years ago. Do you acknowledge the clearance signature as yours? He didn't flinch. I do. Were you ordered to make that change? No, I acted independently. I believed it better reflected the command values we were trying to uphold. By misrepresenting your own daughter's conduct. He paused only a second. It was necessary. The original report would have undermined confidence in our training command. That's when Jenna stood. No permission requested. No theatrics. The cadet in that report was my sister, she said. I didn't know until this week, but I read both versions. I saw what he changed. I watched him weaponize the lie. My father didn't interrupt. He didn't even blink. A panelist asked the final question. Do you object to reinstating the original report and removing the modified version from record? He leaned back, voice flat. No objection. Just like that. No apology, no shame, only silence. And I realized then he didn't believe he'd done anything wrong, which is what made him dangerous. Conclusion. They didn't issue a press release. No one stood and saluted. The ruling came through a sealed memo. Colonel Ronald Ashford is to be relieved of all remaining advisory duties and transitioned into full retirement without distinction. Bryn Ashford's field record is to be amended and restored in full. No one clapped. That wasn't the point. Jenna didn't speak to him when it ended. Neither did I. He stood when dismissed, adjusted his cuffs, and walked out like the building didn't matter, like none of us ever had. Outside, the light was dull and gray. Jenna walked beside me, steps, even eyes fixed ahead. He really thinks he did the right thing, she said. I nodded. He always has. She looked down at the badge pinned to her jacket, her rank, her name. Then slowly she unpinned it. I trained my whole life to become a version of him, she said. Turns out I was chasing a ghost. She handed the badge to me, not ceremoniously, not dramatically, just quietly. I don't want this right now. I didn't argue. I took it and closed my hand around it like it might vanish. Later that night, she showed up at my quarters. No uniform, just a coat zipped to her collar and a silent stare that said more than apology ever could. She set a small padded envelope on my desk. No note, no seal. Just my last name scribbled in her handwriting. Inside was a silver badge. No rank, no title, no name. Just wait. On the bottom was a sticky note. Don't wear it, carry it. We didn't talk about what came next. We didn't need to. 2 days later, her transfer request came through. Oversight Division, same branch I came out of. No announcements, no salute. Just a new beginning in a place where truth mattered more than perception. That morning, we drank coffee across from the Orion building. She wore the badge inside her coat, not outside. Hidden, not erased. I'm not ready to forgive him, she said, eyes steady. You don't have to, I replied. She looked at me, then out the window. He taught me that duty means never hesitating. Maybe, I said, but I think what you did is the first time you actually honored that. She smiled, quiet and tired, then bumped my shoulder. See you inside. And she meant it.